You're dead to me." The words hit me like a physical blow, echoing in the silent kitchen as my mother's face contorted with rage. I stood there, my hand pressed against my stinging cheek where she had slapped me moments before. The bottle of cognac on the table between us caught the afternoon light, amber liquid glinting accusingly. "Get out," Rebecca screamed, her words slightly slurred. "I never loved you anyway. It should have been you. You should have been the one who got sick, not my precious Emma." The truth I'd always suspected, finally spoken out loud. Never loved me? Should have been me? 24 years of subtle rejections and painful comparisons crystallized in that moment of brutal honesty. Without a word, I picked up my hastily packed suitcase. My mother was still screaming, but her words had become meaningless noise, like static on a radio tune between stations. I walked out the front door, pulling it close behind me, cutting off her voice mid-rant. How had we gotten here? How had a routine medical test to see if I could donate a kidney to my sister turned into the revelation that had shattered our family forever? Childhood. The beginning. I was 14 when we lost Dad. Emma was only 8. It happened so fast. One minute he was heading home from work, the next we were getting a call about a car accident. Some drunk driver had run a red light and slammed right into him. He hung on for 3 days in the hospital, but his injuries were just too severe. I still remember sitting in the waiting room with my mother during those 3 days, watching her face age years and hours. Dad had been her high school sweetheart. They'd married young, too young, according to Grandma Eleanor, who had initially disapproved but eventually came around when she saw how happy Dad was. He lights up when she walks into a room. I once overheard Grandma tell Grandpa William, "I suppose that counts for something." The funeral remains a blur of black clothes and hushed voices. I remember Mom collapsing against Grandpa's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'll never marry again," she'd wailed. "There will never be another man like David." There was a man there, standing at the back of the funeral home. Tall, with dark hair and a solemn expression. At the time, I'd assumed he was one of Dad's colleagues. Now, looking back with the knowledge I have, I wonder if he was Emma's real father, coming to pay his respects to the man who had unknowingly raised his child. My grandparents, Dad's parents, were amazing through it all. They let us stay in their house for weeks after the funeral and made sure we had everything we needed. Mom didn't even have to work. They sent her money every month to take care of us. "You're so much like your father," Grandma would say to me, stroking my hair. Same eyes. Same quiet determination. I didn't realize then how those words would later explain everything. The subtle shift. That's when things started changing with Mom. It was subtle at first, but as time went on, it became impossible to ignore how differently she treated Emma and me. When we'd go back to school shopping, Emma would get 5 new outfits, while I'd get told to make do with last year's clothes. "You're still growing," Mom would say dismissively. "No point in wasting money." Or at dinner, she'd always give Emma the bigger piece of chicken or the last cookie. If I dared to mention it, the response was always the same. "Don't be selfish, Olivia. Your sister is still growing." Christmas was the worst. Emma would get a pile of presents, while I'd get maybe one or two things, usually practical items like socks or school supplies. One year, I got a dictionary while Emma received a beautiful porcelain doll she'd been coveting for months. When I unwrapped my gift, trying hard not to show my disappointment, Mom had said, "You're always reading. I thought you'd appreciate something educational." I remember the burning feeling behind my eyes, the effort it took not to cry. I retreated to my room early that night, claiming a headache, and spent Christmas evening reading my new dictionary by flashlight, circling all the words that described how I felt. Abandoned, bereft, disregarded, excluded, forgotten. "Mom, can I join the school band?" I asked once, excited about learning to play the flute. I'd been practicing with a cheap plastic recorder for months, teaching myself from library books. Music was my escape, the one place where I felt I could express all the complicated emotions I was too young to name. "Oh, honey, we just can't afford instrument rental right now," she said, barely looking up from her magazine. But the very next week, when Emma mentioned wanting to take dance classes, Mom signed her up immediately. "Of course, sweetie. We need to nurture your talents." I watched from the sidelines as Emma twirled in her new pink leotard, my mother clapping enthusiastically. The recorder felt suddenly childish in my hands, a poor substitute for the silver flute I dreamed of playing. Even with simple things, like when we'd both ask for help with homework, Mom would drop everything to help Emma while telling me to figure it out on my own. Or when we'd both achieve something at school, Emma would get taken out for ice cream for getting a B, while my straightest barely got a good job. The weird thing was, I learned to live with it, maybe because Emma was so different from Mom. She'd always try to share her new things with me or stick up for me when she could. Mom, Olivia helped me with my science project, she'd say. She should come for ice cream too. Sometimes it worked, but more often Mom would find a reason why I couldn't join them. Olivia has homework, or Olivia isn't feeling well, or simply, not this time, Emma. That's what made it bearable, I guess, knowing that even if Mom played favorites, Emma never did. We stayed close despite everything. I loved watching her practice her dance routines, and she'd sit and listen to me play my cheap plastic recorder. We were a team, Emma and me, no matter what Mom did or said. Emma's diagnosis: I was 21 and in my second year of college when Emma was diagnosed with kidney disease. What started as routine blood work during a regular checkup turned into our worst nightmare. I remember the sterile hospital waiting room, the doctor's voice seeming to come from underwater, chronic kidney disease, treatment options, long-term care plans. Emma, my vibrant little sister who loved dance and could make anyone smile, was suddenly a patient. It's genetic, the doctor had explained, looking at my mother with a sympathetic expression. Some forms of kidney disease run in families. I saw something flash across my mother's face then. Fear? Git. At the time, I'd attributed it to the shock of the diagnosis. Now I know better. The diagnosis brought Emma and me even closer together. While Mom spent hours researching treatments and talking to doctors, I'd sit with Emma during her appointments, playing card games and making up silly stories to distract her. Tell me the one about the dancing hippo again, she'd say, her pale face lighting up despite the tubes and monitors surrounding her. Once upon a time, there was a hippo named Henrietta who wanted more than anything to be a ballerina. I'd begin, watching Emma's eyes light up with delight. It was during one of these hospital visits that I first noticed the nurse giving my mother a strange look. She was new, young, probably fresh out of nursing school. Mrs. Carter, she'd said, looking at our mother curiously. You mentioned that kidney disease runs in your family, but I don't see any history of it in your records. My side of the family, Mom had said quickly, her voice tight. My uncle had it. Let's not discuss this now. The nurse had nodded and moved on, but I remember thinking how odd it was that Mom had never mentioned an uncle with kidney disease before. Just another piece of the puzzle that wouldn't fit into place until years later. Mom barely noticed I was there during those hospital visits. She'd spend hours discussing Emma's treatment with the doctors, completely forgetting I was in the room. When she did acknowledge me, it was usually just to send me to get something for Emma or to tell me to be quieter. But I understood. Emma was sick. She needed the attention more than I did. Or at least, that's what I told myself. College and independence. Before I knew it, I was graduating high school. My grades were good enough to get me a partial scholarship to a college in another state. Grandma and Grandpa stepped in again, offering to cover the rest of my tuition and expenses. You deserve a chance to spread your wings, Grandpa had said, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way they did when he was particularly pleased. Your father would be so proud of you. Mom barely made it to the ceremony. She was late because Emma had a doctor's appointment that morning. She didn't even stay for pictures, rushing off to get Emma to another appointment. But again, I couldn't blame her. Emma's health had to come first. College was like stepping into another world. Suddenly, I was hundreds of miles away from the family drama, making new friends, taking interesting classes, and finally feeling like I could breathe. I remember sitting alone in my dorm room that first night, overwhelmed by the strangest feeling. It took me a while to recognize it as freedom. For the first time in my life, I could be Olivia, just Olivia, not Emma's sister or the daughter who wasn't quite good enough. I threw myself into my studies, discovering a passion for art and design that eventually led to my career as an art director. I made friends who valued me for myself, dated boys who didn't know my family history, and gradually built a life that was entirely my own. I called Emma and my grandparents regularly, sharing stories about my classes and campus life. Emma would tell me about her treatments and how she was feeling, while Grandma and Grandpa kept me updated on everything happening at home. Mom rarely called. When she did, it was usually to tell me about Emma's latest test results or to remind me to call my sister more often. She never asked about my classes or how I was doing, but that was okay. I was used to it by now. The crisis. I was in the final semester of my junior year when everything fell apart. It was just after midnight when my phone rang, Mom's number lighting up the screen. My stomach dropped. She never called this late. Olivia. Her voice was raw, hysterical. Emma's in the hospital. Her kidneys have completely failed. She's on a hemodialysis machine. I could hear her crying through the phone. You need to come home right now. The next morning was a blur of emails to professors and rushed packing. I managed to get a leave of absence approved and booked a train ticket home. As the landscape rushed past my window, all I could think about was Emma lying in a hospital bed, waiting for me to come home. I wasn't prepared for how much she had deteriorated in the months since I'd last seen her. My vibrant, dancing sister now looked pale and frail, tethered to machines that beeped and whirred ominously. Mom was waiting for me at the train station, pacing back and forth on the platform. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. As soon as she saw me, she grabbed my arm and started pulling me toward the parking lot. "Thank God you're here," she said, her voice tight with tension. "Emma's been asking for you." The entire car ride to the hospital was filled with Mom's endless stream of words about Emma's condition. How pale she looked during the procedure, how much weight she'd lost, how she could barely eat because the medications made her nauseated, how the needles left bruises on her arms. Each detail felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "She's so weak, Olivia," Mom kept saying, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "My baby is suffering so much. The hemodialysis is keeping her alive, but it's not a solution. She needs a real kidney. She needs." Mom suddenly fell silent as we pulled into the hospital parking lot. She turned off the engine but didn't get out of the car. Instead, she turned to face me, and I saw something change in her expression. The worried, tearful look was replaced by something harder, colder, more calculating. "You can save her," she said, her voice suddenly stern and commanding. "You must give her your kidney." I sat there, frozen. It wasn't the suggestion that shocked me. Of course, I'd considered the possibility of being a donor. It was the way she said it, like she was ordering me to hand over an object that belonged to her. "Mom," I said carefully, "what about the risks? What would happen to my health if I—" She cut me off with a harsh laugh. "Your health? Emma's life and health are more important than yours. How can you even think about yourself at a time like this?" The cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Had she always seen me as nothing more than a spare parts repository for her precious Emma? I somehow made it through the hospital visit that day, putting on a brave face for Emma's sake. She looked so small in that big hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to various machines, but her face lit up when she saw me. "Olivia." Her voice was weak, but her smile was as bright as ever. "You came." We sat there for a while, talking about nothing and everything. Her favorite nurse, my college classes, the terrible hospital food. I didn't mention Mom's demand. I couldn't bear to burden her with it, not when she was fighting so hard just to stay alive. That night, back at our family home, I couldn't sleep. Mom's words kept echoing in my head. "Emma's life and health are more important than yours." Had she always felt that way? Had I always been the expendable daughter? When I finally came down for breakfast the next morning, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly drinking her coffee like nothing had happened. She looked up when I walked in and, in a matter-of-fact tone, said, "We need to get you tested as soon as possible to make sure you're a suitable donor. I'll call the hospital today to schedule the appointments." I gripped my coffee mug tightly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, I haven't decided yet about giving Emma my kidney. The silence lasted only a moment before Mom exploded. She slammed her coffee mug down so hard that hot coffee splashed across the table. "You haven't decided?" she screamed, her face turning red. "What is there to decide? Your sister is dying." I flinched as she stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Mom, please don't. Don't mom me. You selfish, heartless girl." She was pacing now, gesturing wildly. "You want to kill your sister. You want her to die so you can have all the attention for yourself." She grabbed a dish from the counter and threw it into the sink. The sound of shattering porcelain made me jump. "You're going to murder your own sister because you're too selfish to help her." I couldn't take it anymore. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely function, but somehow I managed to run upstairs to my old room. I grabbed my still-packed suitcase and stuffed in a few more things from my dresser while Mom continued screaming from downstairs. "You get back here. We're not done talking about this." But I was done. I ran down the stairs, past my raging mother, and out the front door. I could hear her following me, still shouting about how selfish I was, how I was killing my sister, how I was a horrible daughter. I just kept running until I couldn't hear her anymore. Refuge, my grandparents' house, was only a few blocks away. It had always been my sanctuary, the place where I felt unconditionally loved and accepted. Grandma opened the door before I even finished knocking. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" She pulled me into a hug as I burst into tears again. Grandpa appeared behind her, his face concerned. They sat me down in their cozy living room, the same room where we'd spent so many happy moments as a family. The familiar surroundings, Grandpa's worn leather armchair, the bookshelf filled with well-thumbed paperbacks, the family photos arranged carefully on the mantel, helped steady my racing heart. Grandma made hot chocolate, not the instant kind, but real hot chocolate with melted chocolate and warm milk, just like she used to make when I was little. The ritual of it, the simmering milk, the careful stirring, the ceramic mug warm in my hands, was as comforting as the drink itself. Through tears and shaking hands wrapped around the warm mug, I told them everything about Mom's demand for my kidney, her cruel words, her rage when I said I needed time to think. "Of course, we knew about Emma's condition," Grandpa said softly. "We've been helping with her medical bills, but this." He shook his head, his lined face troubled. "This goes too far. Sweetheart," Grandma took my hand, her own weathered by time but still strong. "This has to be your decision. Nobody, not even your mother, has the right to demand something like this from you. It's your body, your choice." My phone kept buzzing in my pocket. Mom's name flashed on the screen over and over. Text messages scrolled past. "Get tested immediately. Your sister needs you. Stop being so selfish. I can't believe you're doing this to your own sister." I turned off my phone, unable to bear the onslaught of guilt and accusation. That night, as I lay in the guest bedroom that had become increasingly mine over the years, I found myself thinking about my father. What would he have done in this situation? Would he have stood up to Mom? Would he have protected me from her unreasonable demands? I had only vague memories of him mediating conflicts between Mom and me. He had been a quiet man, more comfortable expressing his love through actions than words. He'd been the one to attend my school concerts, to hang my artwork on the refrigerator, to teach me to ride a bike and drive a car. "Your father always saw the best in people," Grandpa had told me once. "Sometimes too much. He had a blind spot when it came to your mother." I wondered now what that blind spot had concealed. Had he suspected her infidelity? Had he known that Emma wasn't his biological daughter? Or had he loved us both so completely that it hadn't mattered to him? These questions would never be answered now. But as I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt his presence somehow, a comforting weight at the edge of my consciousness. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't face it alone. Confrontation and decision. The next morning, we were sitting at breakfast when we heard the front door slam open. Mom burst into the dining room like a hurricane, her hair wild, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. "You're coming home right now," she demanded, pointing at me. "We're going to the hospital to get you tested." "She's not your daughter to command," Grandma said, putting her arm around my shoulders. Her voice was calm, but held a steel I rarely heard. "You can't force her to give up a kidney, even for Emma's sake." The hell I can't. Mom's voice reached a new pitch of hysteria. She has to do it, and if she doesn't, she turned to me, her eyes cold and hard. If you don't do this, you're dead to me. Do you understand? You won't be my daughter anymore. Before anyone could respond, she spun around and stormed out, slamming the door so hard that Grandma's china cabinet rattled. The sound of her car engine revving and tires screeching on pavement echoed through the sudden silence. We sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then Grandpa spoke, his voice quiet but firm. You need to do what you think is right, Olivia. Not what Rebecca demands. Not what we want. Not even what Emma might want. What you believe is right. I nodded, tears filling my eyes again. I need to see Emma, I said. I need to talk to her about this. That afternoon, I visited Emma in the hospital. The nurse at the station handed me a surgical mask, making me sanitize my hands thoroughly before leading me to Emma's room. Walking into that sterile hospital room was like stepping into another world. The steady beep of monitors filled the air, and tubes seemed to connect my sister to every machine imaginable. Emma looked so small in that big hospital bed, but her face lit up when she saw me. Olivia! Her voice was weak, but her smile was as bright as ever. You came. I carefully sat in the chair beside her bed, trying not to disturb any of the tubes or wires. Of course, I came. Someone has to make sure you're not driving the nurses crazy. We sat there for a while, talking about nothing and everything. Her favorite nurse, my college classes, the terrible hospital food. Then her expression turned serious. Mom told me, she said quietly, about asking you to be my donor. I felt my throat tighten. Emma, no, listen. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold against mine. I would never ask you to do that. It has to be your choice, Olivia. Only yours. Tears welled up in my eyes as I squeezed her hand. Here she was, hooked up to machines, fighting for her life, and still thinking about my feelings, while Mom was at home screaming about my selfishness. Emma was protecting my right to choose. You know, she continued, her voice soft. I've always known Mom treated us differently. I tried to make up for it, but I knew it wasn't fair to you. It wasn't your fault, I said quickly. You were just a kid. So were you, she replied, a wisdom beyond her years in her eyes. We were both just kids caught in something we didn't understand. Looking at her lying there, so brave and so sick, I made my decision. I want to get tested, I said, not because Mom's forcing me, but because I want to know if I can help. The smile she gave me was worth everything. The truth revealed, when Mom found out about my decision to get tested, it was like the past few days never happened. She rushed to hug me, crying and saying, You're doing the right thing, Olivia, the right thing. I moved back home from my grandparents' house, and over the next few weeks, I underwent test after test. Blood draws, tissue typing, psychological evaluations, the works. Mom was suddenly sweet as pie, making my favorite meals and asking about my day. It was like having the mother I'd always wanted, but somehow that made it even worse. Knowing it was conditional, knowing it would last only as long as I did what she wanted. Finally, after what felt like endless waiting, the doctor called us in to discuss the results. Dr. Matthews was a kind, middle-aged man with prematurely gray hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering. Mom and I sat in his office, the desk between us covered with papers and test results. He adjusted his glasses, looking uncomfortable. I'm afraid I have some unexpected news, he began, shuffling through the papers. According to these tests, Olivia cannot be a donor for Emma. Mom leaned forward, her body tense as a bowstring. What? Why not? We can do more tests. It's not about more tests, the doctor interrupted gently. The issue is, well, the degree of kinship between Olivia and Emma. It's not sufficient for a transplant. I sat there in the doctor's office, trying to make sense of his words. The room seemed to be spinning slightly. I don't understand, I said slowly. What exactly do you mean by degree of kinship? Can you explain? Dr. Matthews cleared his throat, glancing between Mom and me. Well, the genetic markers in your blood work show that you and Emma are not full siblings. You share only one parent in common. I turned to look at Mom. She had gone completely white, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly that her knuckles matched her face. Mom, my voice came out as barely a whisper. What's he talking about? How is this possible? She jumped to her feet so quickly that her chair almost fell over. This doesn't matter. None of this matters. We'll find another donor. Before either of us could say anything else, she bolted from the office, letting the door slam behind her. The doctor waited a moment before speaking again, his voice gentle. Ms. Carter, the tests show that while you and Emma share the same mother, you have different fathers. Your sister's biological father is not the same man who raised you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Different fathers? My sister's biological father isn't my father? Mom had cheated on dad, had an affair, got pregnant with Emma while married to my father. Suddenly, everything made horrible, perfect sense. The favoritism, the constant comparison, the subtle and not so subtle ways she'd made me feel less than Emma my entire life. I must have looked as shocked as I felt because Dr. Matthews reached across the desk and patted my hand awkwardly. I'm very sorry to be the one to tell you this. Would you like me to call someone for you? Your grandparents, perhaps? I shook my head, still trying to process this new reality. No, I managed to say. I need to talk to my mother. The drive home was a blur. I don't even remember getting in my car and navigating the familiar streets. When I walked into the house, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of cognac and a half-empty glass in front of her. We need to talk, I said, my voice shaking, about how you cheated on Dad, about how you betrayed him. She took another swig from her glass, not even bothering to look at me. It's none of your business. And anyway, what difference does it make now? You're useless. You can't even help your sister. I stared at her in disbelief. My business? Dad was my father, and you cheated on him. You had an affair and got pregnant with Emma. This is all your fault. If you hadn't cheated, if Emma had the same father as me, I could have helped her. The sound of the slap echoed through the kitchen before I even registered that Mom had moved. My cheek burned where her hand had struck me, and I stood frozen, watching as she stormed up the stairs. She came back moments later with my suitcase, the one I'd barely unpacked after moving back from my grandparents, and threw it at my feet. Get out, she screamed, her words slightly slurred from the cognac. I never loved you anyway. It should have been you. You should have been the one who got sick, not my precious Emma. I stood there, my hand still pressed against my stinging cheek as her words sank in. Never loved me? Should have been me? The truth I'd always suspected, finally spoken out loud. Without a word, I picked up my suitcase. Mom was still screaming, but her words had become meaningless noise. I walked out the front door, pulling it close behind me, cutting off her voice mid-rant. The aftermath. I found myself back at my grandparents' doorstep, tears streaming down my face. This time, when Grandma opened the door, I couldn't even speak. I just fell into her arms, sobbing. They sat me down in the kitchen, and through hiccuping breaths, I told them everything about the test results, about Mom's affair, about how Emma wasn't really Dad's daughter, about Mom's cruel words, and how she'd thrown me out. Grandma's face grew harder with each word, while Grandpa sat completely still, his coffee growing cold in front of him. When I finished, the silence in the kitchen was deafening. We'll handle this, Grandma said firmly, reaching for the phone. First thing tomorrow morning. And she did. I was eating breakfast the next day when Grandma made the call, putting it on speaker so Grandpa could hear too. Rebecca, this is Eleanor. Grandma's voice was cold as ice. Pack your things. You need to leave the house. Mom's voice crackled through the speaker. What? What are you talking about? That house belongs to us. That house belongs to us, Grandma continued. And you who betrayed our son, who's been cruel to our granddaughter. You have no right to live there anymore. It was just one time. Mom's voice rose to a shriek. It was an accident. I loved David. I really did. And I love Olivia, too. You have to believe me. One time was enough. Grandpa spoke up, his voice trembling with anger. One time destroyed this family. Please. Mom was crying now. Where will we go? What about Emma's treatment? We could stop paying for Emma's treatment, Grandma said coldly. She's not our granddaughter, after all. I felt my heart stop for a moment, but Grandma continued. But we won't do that. We're not cruel like you, Rebecca. We'll continue to pay for Emma's treatment because she's an innocent child who needs help. But you need to leave that house, find your own place to live, and get a job. It's long past time you stood on your own 2 feet. After the call ended, I looked at my grandparents with new eyes. Their capacity for forgiveness, continuing to help Emma despite the pain her very existence must cause them, humbled me. How did you know? I asked softly. About Emma, I mean. Did you suspect all along? Grandma and Grandpa exchanged a look, a lifetime of understanding passing between them. We had our suspicions, Grandpa finally said. The timing was convenient. And Emma doesn't look anything like our David. But we never said anything, Grandma added, reaching for my hand. What good would it have done? David loved that little girl from the moment she was born. That was enough for us. And now? I asked, hardly daring to breathe. Now, we do what David would have wanted, Grandpa said firmly. We take care of his daughters, both of them. Later that day, I went to visit Emma in the hospital. She looked even smaller than before, if that was possible. When I walked in, she gave me a weak smile. Hey, she said softly. So I guess we know why you can't be my donor now. Different dads. Who would have thought? Listen to me, I squeezed her hand. Nothing has changed between us. You're still my sister, and I still love you. Grandma and Grandpa are going to keep helping with your treatment. We're going to find you a donor, Emma. I promise. And I still love you. Grandma and Grandpa are going to keep helping with your treatment. We're going to find you a donor, Emma. I promise. Really? Her eyes filled with tears. Even though I'm not really there. Really? I cut her off firmly. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, and you're my sister, no matter what any test says. In that moment, looking at my sister's face, so much like our mother's, so different from mine, I realized that the truth had set us both free. No more wondering why Mom loved her more. No more blaming myself for not being good enough. We were victims of the same lie, Emma and I. And now, together, we could begin to heal. The new reality. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustments and revelations. Mom, under pressure from my grandparents, found a small apartment closer to the hospital and took a receptionist job at a dental office. She had been resistant at first, claiming she needed to be with Emma full-time, but the doctors had gently pointed out that the hemodialysis schedule actually left plenty of time for her to work a standard day shift. She hasn't held a job since before you were born, Grandpa told me one evening as we sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Your father, and then we made it too easy for her to avoid responsibility. I wondered how different things might have been if Mom had been forced to stand on her own 2 feet earlier. Would she have been less focused on Emma and more aware of her own identity outside of motherhood? Would she have treated me differently? These questions haunted me as I gradually rebuilt my life. I returned to college to finish my degree, but I called Emma every day and came home most weekends. Our relationship, freed from Mom's manipulations, grew stronger and more authentic. Mom and I maintained a strained, distant relationship. She never apologized for her actions or words, and I didn't expect her to. Some wounds run too deep for simple bandages. She's from a generation that doesn't talk about feelings. Grandma said once when I expressed frustration over Mom's inability to acknowledge the hurt she'd caused. And some people just don't have the capacity for self-reflection. I was learning to accept that Mom might never be the mother I needed, but I could choose how much power I gave her continued rejection. Each day, I worked to define myself not by her approval, but by my own standards and values. A new hope. 3 months after the truth came out, Emma called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work, finalizing designs for a major ad campaign, but I always took her calls. Olivia. She practically shouted into the phone. They found a donor. The doctor just told us. There was this man. He died in an accident, but he was an organ donor, and I'm a match. She was crying now, happy tears. I'm getting a kidney, Olivia. I might actually get better. I found myself crying too, relief washing over me like a wave. After everything we'd been through, finally some good news. The transplant surgery was scheduled for the following week. I took time off work and stayed at my grandparents' house, spending hours at the hospital before and after the procedure. The surgery went smoothly, and seeing the color return to Emma's cheeks was like watching a flower bloom in time lapse. The doctors say I might be able to dance again, she told me as we played cards in her recovery room. Not professionally or anything, but just for fun. I'd like to see that, I said, smiling at the thought of Emma dancing again, free from machines and medications. Mom was there too, hovering anxiously, bringing magazines and snacks, adjusting Emma's pillows. She barely acknowledged my presence, but for Emma's sake, I maintained a polite facade. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Legacies. A month after Emma's surgery, Grandpa asked me to come to his study after dinner. Grandma was there too, sitting in the armchair by the window, her knitting needles clicking softly. We need to talk about something serious, Grandpa said, sitting me down in the leather chair across from his desk. About our will. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. You need to know this. Everything we have, the house, our savings, everything. It's going to you, Olivia. Only you. But Emma. I began. Emma isn't our granddaughter, Grandma said gently. However, once it's yours, you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to share with your sister, that will be your choice. I understood what they were really saying. They were punishing Mom, not Emma. And they were trusting me to do the right thing. I'll make sure Emma is taken care of, I promised. Dad would have wanted that. Grandpa's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You're so much like him, he said softly. He'd be proud of the woman you've become. Coming from him, those words meant everything. Forward motion. It's been a year since everything fell apart, though sometimes it feels like a lifetime. I'm back in Chicago now, continuing my career at the advertising agency. My recent promotion to senior art director came with a substantial raise, enough that I've been able to help Emma with her college tuition. She's studying music education now. Her health improved enough to pursue her dreams. We talk several times a week, and she visits me during school breaks. Our relationship has deepened beyond what I ever thought possible, bonded not just by shared childhood experiences, but by the truth we faced together. Mom is still living in her apartment. She and Emma have a relatively good relationship, though Emma tells me that she's more aware now of Mom's manipulative tendencies. I see her more clearly, Emma told me during her last visit. I love her, but I don't let her control me anymore. I've had less success establishing boundaries. Mom rarely calls me directly, but when she does, it's usually because she wants something. Last month, it was money for car repairs. The month before, it was help convincing her landlord to fix the heating. I help when I can, not for her sake, but because it's who I want to be. I refuse to let her rejection shape me into someone cold or bitter. Grandma and Grandpa are doing well, though slowing down a bit. I visit them as often as I can, treasuring each moment with them. They've taught me what unconditional love looks like, a lesson I carry with me every day. Yesterday, Mom called me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Olivia, her voice was small, hesitant. I need your help. Could you? Could you talk to your grandparents? Ask them to let me stay in the house permanently? I know if you ask them. No, my voice was firm, final. Please, Olivia, I'm your mother. I know I made mistakes, but mistakes? I cut her off. You cheated on Dad. You lied to everyone for years. You treated me like I was nothing. You never loved me. That's not true. I I hung up the phone. Maybe someday I'll forgive her. Maybe someday the pain of her betrayal won't feel so sharp. But not today. Today, I'm focusing on Emma's continued recovery, on my career, on building a life that isn't defined by my mother's choices or her secrets. As I sit in my apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline, a cup of hot chocolate in my hands, the real kind, made with melted chocolate and warm milk, just like Grandma taught me, I realize that family isn't always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we build from the broken pieces we're given. My phone buzzes with a text from Emma. Just got my blood work back. All normal. Doctor says I'm officially boring. Love you, sis. I smile and type back. Never boring. Love you too. Some truths destroy, but others set you free.